Welcome back to the Cheap Air Gunner channel. This is Cherokee Steve. We're moving on with our maintenance slash modifications to the 1322. Now, we just completed polishing up the sear, and if necessary, although I found it not to be, any raised edges, any burrs you might find on your trigger, go ahead and do that. We also polished up the hammer. Now the hammer is just sitting off to the side, and we're going to move on to the next item that is going to require some polishing. At least I recommend it. And that is the pump slash valve tube. Normally from the factory, it's pretty good job as far as deburring. You have a slot over here for your pump handle and the pump handle linkage. You've got plenty of holes, the transfer port hole here, the small threaded hole that little tiny screw that goes under the bolt screws into, that goes all the way through and through the tube here. The slot for the hammer pin, that's back here. On the other side we have a slot for the sear. The screws that hold the plug for the hammer and hammer spring, that's back here on the bottom side. We've got that indentation that only allows the valve to be pushed up to a certain point. Now that's going to affect how we're going to go about sanding and polishing the inside of this tube. What I like to use and what I recommend is a wooden dowel. This is a 1/2 inch. The hole inside the tube, the ID of this tube is 625. So a 625 diameter wooden dowel isn't going to allow for enough room for some sandpaper. What I do is take some Gorilla Glue, cut out a nice portion of 800 grit sandpaper, a nice rectangular one that will wrap mostly around the wooden dowel, and glue it on there. You're going to have to obviously wait for that to dry thoroughly. Now I've already used this on my 2289, so I already had it made, but it's a 1/2 inch. It's about 11.5 inches long, and what I did was at this end I screwed in a hex screw, sheet metal screw. This particular one has a 3/8 hex on the end. I have a 3/8 hex attachment here that we're going to be using. We're going to be moving from the Dremel tool onto our drill. Again, a cordless drill will work fine. If you don't have a cordless drill, you have an electric corded drill, that will work fine. But you need one of these hex bits that will pick this up and spin the wooden dowel with the sandpaper inside the tube. Now we're going to have to work on this as two separate halves, because it's only going to go in as far, well, it will go past, but it's going to get really chewed up, especially at this portion that where the indentation is, that limits how far the valve goes into the tube. Once it starts hitting against that, it tends to really want to tear up and rip up the sandpaper. So we're going to try to stop even or just short of that from the pump handle side of the tube. Then we'll have to turn around and work back from the hammer side of the tube up to that same notch. But we'll be using the drill to do that. One of the other things you're going to have to pay attention to is with the sandpaper not being completely wrapped around, and even if it was completely wrapped around, you're going to have an edge of sandpaper regardless overlapping the other side of the sandpaper or stopping just short as I've done. But what that's going to want to do is, especially where this slot is for the pump handle linkage anyway, it's going to want to catch as it goes around. It's going to catch on that slot and want to rip sandpaper off of the dowel. So you got to be really careful around this side. As a matter of fact, what you may want to do this is just do it by hand. That will suffice. Any burrs that are left, especially from the hole for the cross pin that holds the pump handle mechanism onto the tube, work it around back and forth really good. Even now, as you can see me doing it by hand, it wants to catch, but angle it back and forth, right to left, up and down. We're just polishing out the inside of this tube. I'm using 800 grit. It's a coarser of the fine grit sandpaper. It worked well for my 2289. You can, like I said, this end where the slot is for the pump handle mechanism, I tend to just work it back and forth by hand. As you work in farther than that, you can grab your drill, chuck up your 3/8 hex attachment, and use that. To do your spinning. And it's just a matter of working it back and forth, pulling it back out, working it back in. I try to keep my fingers inside the slot, keeping pressure on the dowel. Just keep repeating that over and over and over again and get the inside of that tube polished out really nice with that 800 grit sandpaper. I'm going to be doing this back and forth over and over and over again. Hold it up to the light, you'll really get a really good visual of how well it's polishing out the inside of the tube. Now we're going to have to flip the tube around and do the same from the opposite side. And again, it's just going to be doing it back and forth. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this simply by hand. It's just going to take longer. You'll have to be a little bit more patient. That's one of the things I really enjoy about this process of working on the gun. And this is a good thing to do, even if you're not going to modify your gun. Any burrs that Craftsman may have missed, you're eliminating. You're getting rid of. You're polishing up the inside. The wooden dowel is not going to do any damage. It isn't going to gouge up or scar up the inside of the tube at all. And just working back and forth by hand is perfectly fine. As I've already said, on certain areas of the tube itself, you're going to have to do it by hand. Especially down here, as I said, by the end where that slot is. That really wants to grab the paper and rip it off of the dowel pin. but focus on the slot area itself as well as out towards the end where that roll pin went through. I don't use any type of compound or anything like that. Strictly use the sandpaper. Just going back and forth, in and out. Again, exercise some patience, stick with it, get it nice and polished. Rely on your visual, hold it up to a light, really see how nice and smooth it's coming out. When it's all done, what I like to do is, I've got an air compressor. I don't just use compressed air. I'll spray down the inside with some brake cleaner from, you can pick it up at any auto parts store, but really kind of flush it out with the brake cleaner, then blow it out with some compressed air. If you don't have that, simply using the dowel pin with paper towel, forcing it through there, that will work just fine. And then as far as lubing up the inside, what I tend to use, very, very small amount of, your Crossman Pelgan oil will do a very nice job of evenly lubing up the inside of the tube. But I'm going to continue working on this, polishing it with my dowel, with my glued on sandpaper. This is something, again, even if you're not modifying your gun, I would suggest it's a good practice to get into. Quality control will only be so good at any gun manufacturer, including those that make $2,000 PCPs. They're humans. They're just as prone to making a mistake and missing burrs as anyone else. So, good idea to go through this practice of polishing the inside of the pump tube. Okay? I'll be back with it polished out and cleaned out. Okay? This is the next step in the process I go through as far as beginning to modify the gun. One bit of advice, I'm still working on polishing out the tube. The wooden dowel. These are readily available at any craft store, and even what I have done is I have a wide variety, different sizes and lengths, but even in the craft aisle at Walmart, you'll find an extremely nice collection of wooden dowels, extremely cheap, extremely expensive, inexpensive, not expensive, but I would recommend picking up a variety of different sizes, different lengths. Again, 1/2 inch is what I'm currently using. They make really good push instruments for jammed pellets. Something that isn't going to damage the inside of your barrel, isn't going to scar it up. I kind of, not recommend using something metal, a long metal rod. You risk scratching up and damaging the rifling in your barrel if you're pushing back towards the breech trying to get a jammed pellet out. A lot of the times a wooden dowel will do the trick. It depends on how badly the pellet is damaged and how badly it's jammed in there. Keep in mind, the smaller the diameter, the more likely you may break it off inside the barrel if you are trying to push out a jammed up pellet. But you know, you can get them in small enough diameters where you can certainly use it for that, as well as polishing out insides of different tubes. And again, this isn't just for pumpers. This would apply to any tube on any gun you want to really go over. Make sure that it's got a good job of deburring done to it. Always trust yourself to do a good job as far as that. Never put it totally in the hands of a manufacturer, because like I said, they're human and make mistakes just like everybody else. So that is my my tip as far as the wooden dowel itself. Craft stores, the craft aisle at Walmart, good place to pick these up. Pick some up, and you'll be well on your way to polishing out your own pump tube. Okay, getting back on with our video of polishing out the pump valve tube for the 1322. I've been working on it. I've been working that wooden dowel with the strip of sandpaper glued onto it, back and forth. Again, a lot of it I did by hand, just working it in and out, cocking the dowel off to the right, off to the left, up and down, back and forth, over and over and over and over again, working it in from the pump handle side, and then working it in from the hammer side. But it's kind of hard. It's got a very nice polished finish to it. No deep scratches. Did the deburring job, I'm sure, adequately. I did go over and put in a nice piece thinner wooden dowel I used, folded up and wrapped around with a paper towel, coated it with some Pelgon oil, worked that in and around throughout the length of the inside of the pump tube. That's after I sprayed it all down with some brake cleaner, blew it out with some compressed air, made sure everything was nice and dry, nice and clean, went back in with the wooden dowel, paper towel, and some Pelgon oil. On the outside, I like to use this particular product on the outside of all my guns, rifles and pistols, but it's the Remington Rem oil. I did do a light coat of that on the outside of the pump tube, and this is pretty much done. So what we will get to next is actually beyond the typical, might want to chalk this up as maintenance, but getting into the modification, opening up stuff, whether it's inside the valve, whether it's the ports, the transfer port, the barrel port. I will be getting to those things in the next series of videos. So definitely don't want to miss that. It will be the part of, you know, the modifications that are really going to increase the performance of the gun. So I'm looking forward to that, excited about it. Hope you are too. Be sure to check them out. Didn't mean to forget about it. Had it sitting right here in order to show you. This right here, although you can individually, and I have picked up individual dowel pins, sold, you know, one piece. in various diameters in the craft aisle at Walmart. This particular item is a package of various diameter dowel length pins, 40 different pieces. Actually, some of them are squared off. Most of them are round, but it will come in very handy. One of the things that is a really good usage for this, that it's going to be coming up, that I will be using it for, when you go to drill out a port, especially specifically the barrel port, and we're going to be opening that up. We're going to be going through the port in steps, drill steps, starting in working our way up to the final size drill. But going in with a couple of different size drills, and not wanting to hit the back end of the barrel and do any damage to it, we'll be plugging up the ID of the barrel with one of these wooden dowel pins that will prevent us from going through and hitting the back side of the barrel when we go to open up the port. And again, it's wooden. It's not going to do any damage itself being inside the barrel, so it's definitely something you're going to want to pick up. These multi-size packs come in really handy. And again, craft aisle at Walmart's where I picked mine up. So just wanted to throw that out there. I will repeat it again. Try to end all my videos the same way. Stay safe, shoot safe, take care.